Elon Musk, he warned us that a big, humongous, gargantuous bombshell was coming. And the most interesting part about this, what was supposed to be a bombshell to the right wing, was that it included Hunter Biden and supposedly Joe Biden's interference using Twitter in the election, how it all proves that Trump should really be our president. And then it dropped, the Twitter files as it's called, and it did not prove any of that. And it was very sad for the right wing, in my opinion. But let me kind of lay the groundwork and tell you how this went. So like I said, Elon Musk, being the new owner of Twitter, was hinting and then said, I'm about to hand over all of this documentation of what I now have access to as the person owning the company of Twitter, of the communication and coordination behind the scenes within Twitter in relation to a few different subjects, but specifically, again, the one most cared about by the right wing was Hunter Biden. And Matt Taibbi, the journalist, is going to get to look at all of this and publish a story, the Twitter files, about it. So this was published on Twitter in a Twitter thread, which to me, for something that's supposed to be the biggest bombshell ever, felt a little weird, just getting released like this in this format on Twitter. But whatever, I guess it's about Twitter, so throw it up on Twitter. And walked through what was supposed to be just the biggest story you've ever seen in your life. And I was very underwhelmed, I'll say. Now, we're going to walk through a few of the key components, but overall, it's trying to be framed as this is a larger conversation about Twitter's effect on our election processes or the possible governmental influence in that. And I think there's a very long, nuanced, and fair conversation to be had about how do we manage this new world that we're in with social media that has such an outsized effect in our political process, and how do we make sure that that doesn't disproportionately hurt or help different individuals, different political figures, and make it as fair as possible. That's a conversation we should have. The part of this that the right wing is wanting to focus on, and what we'll also kind of in a mirror form focus on, is the Joe Biden component and what's supposed to be showing his horrible interference, which again just wasn't there. So it started with Matt Taibbi releasing this thing in Substack, warning that a big story was coming out, and at the end of it that caught a lot of attention. Taibbi wrote, "What I can say is that in an exchange for the opportunity to cover a unique and explosive story, I have had to agree to certain conditions." So presumably by agreeing with Elon Musk for Taibbi to do the story, Elon Musk said that certain conditions had to be met, which is odd, and he never, Matt Taibbi that is, clarified what those conditions were. Now here's the big part that's being focused on from the thread. Slowly, as Matt Taibbi writes, over time, Twitter staff and executive began to find more and more users for these tools. Outsiders began petitioning the company to manipulate speech as well. First a little, then more often, then constantly. By 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive would write to another, more to review from the Biden team. The reply would come back handled, and it shows an email here, as you can see. So what's being alleged there, and with receipts, is the Biden team reached out to Twitter and said, can you take these stories down? Now, what the article or the Twitter files failed to mention is what the Biden campaign at this point, right? Because this is 2020 while he's campaigning to be president. He's not in the government at this point in time, is asking for photos of a nude Hunter Biden that Hunter Biden did not give his consent to be on the platform would be taken down, which those are against Twitter's terms of service. You can't throw up nude photos of someone who doesn't give you consent. And it's also not a government official asking them to take it down, and it's just a request. And they're going, oh, they're just indicating to us that something on our platform is against our terms of service. Now, again, I'll say, it's true that more powerful people, more well-known, influential people, they'll get the ear of people at companies like Twitter a whole lot more than you or I would if we reached out and said, hey, there's something on the platform that seems to be against your terms of service. But that applies in every situation. For example, if I were to go to YouTube and say, y'all did something in your regulation of my channel that was wrong, I would be much less likely to get an answer than someone who has 10 times the size of my platform. That person would be listened to more. So same thing with these social media platforms. Again, we can start pushing for policies to minimize the influence that individuals like a Joe Biden or a Donald Trump, as we're about to get to whole for this, how Trump plays into this, and try to make it more of an equal playing field. But because human beings operate these private companies, human beings are going to be more inclined to listen to those that they see as more influential. Again, it can be discussed. It's not at all some huge indictment on Biden's corruption or something. He sent a request and said, hey, there's a photo of my son, Hunter Biden, being floated around on your platform that's against your terms of service because of the story that was being broken. You should take it down. And they went, oh, it is against our terms of service. We're going to take it down. Horrible corruption. But then what did get highlighted in this piece, but is not being focused on by too many in the right wing, is the fact that Twitter has done the same thing for a sitting president, Donald Trump. This is wild that they're ignoring this, too many of them. Matt Taibbi admits celebrities and unknowns alike could be removed or reviewed at the behest of a political party, and it shows an example of that. Both parties had access to these tools. For instance, in 2020, requests from both the Trump White House and the Biden campaign were received and honored. So the bombshell is supposed to be that Biden manipulated the election by asking as a non-governmental official Twitter to take down something that was against their terms of service because it was a nude photo of their son that wasn't put on there consensually. And they won't say that it's a horrible influence in the election, that the sitting president, who is in the government and does actually have power at that point in time, also got his requests granted by Twitter. Because what they want to say is that this is a violation of the First Amendment because Biden, and sometimes they'll pretend like this was when he was vice president or president, influenced Twitter to influence the election. But if you care about the First Amendment, you understand it has to do with the government, not a private citizen running for the government. And the person who was in the government at that time, at the most powerful position, also got his wishes granted on certain stories that he asked to be taken down. So again, I don't love the idea that it would be so hard for me to go out and get a post taken down that I think violated their terms of service, but a whole lot easier for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But if you want to make a whole fuss about how Hunter Biden's story is proof that Joe Biden and Twitter were trying to do everything possible to make Trump lose, you're just being dishonest. That's the only thing I can say about that. So that's the big bombshell. We will link both the Twitter thread for Matt Taibbi, you can read through it yourself, and also a Mediaite article that I was just citing from, where they nicely break down kind of the different elements of this that I think are important for people to understand. What is funny is even the person who broke the New York Post story way back when that is being discussed in this context. The idea is that Joe Biden was trying to suppress a New York Post article, that the woman I'm about to show you was involved in writing. And even she, when this broke, went on Tucker Carlson and said, there's not really a smoking gun here.
To Miranda Devine. She is, of course, a New York Post columnist. We spoke to her at the time, more than 2 years ago, about the censorship of this story. She's since written a book about it called Laptop from Hell, which is excellent. She joins us tonight. Miranda Devine, you are at the very center of this story. What do you make of it?
Look, I think we've seen quite a bit that's useful. It's not really the smoking gun we'd hoped for. I feel that Elon Musk has held back some material in particular.
So because she is still someone who's rooting for this to be something, to be a story, it has to be, the reason it's not a smoking gun is because there's still more that's going to come out. But I've been hearing about more about to come out with Hunter Biden since 2.5 years ago. So I thought if something's going to break, it's going to be in this whole thing that's being hyped up, and still we have not got it. The only thing that people might say I'm dishonest for not talking about, so I'll address right here, is it is true that it seems to be the case Twitter employees had an inclination, had more relationships with Democrats than they did with Republicans. Now, like I told you, they had relationships with Republicans and respected the White House's request to get posts taken down in situations. But because human beings are behind the scenes, human beings are going to have political biases, and their relationships will reflect that. And I think it's a conversation, as I'll say a million times, to be had, but it's not the bombshell that the right wing had hoped. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to be a part of what makes this show possible, plus get access to the full video version of the show hours before any of the clips are uploaded to YouTube, plus get access to an extra full show every Saturday that only members can see, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Luke Beasley. That's patreon.com/Luke Beasley, and there is a link in the description.